但 share PowerPoint 那陣用，等陣用你部機 share。咁個 cam 就影晒我哋3個。
好 echo 嘅聲。我瞄咗聽唔到我講嘢咪㗎。
聽唔到。
好 echo 我覺得。
啱啊，你都覺得？
係啊，好 fit 都覺得，好似浮下浮下。
咁啱啊！
應該你都慣呢啲聲，可能都係咁上下。
咁使唔使開定 PowerPoint 先？
開咗啦，
佢又轉咗喺底度啊！
開咗。一陣撳一撳就開到。呢部機影咗2個。
即係用你部機開 PowerPoint。咁部機點樣影住我哋？唔係用佢嗰部影。
係喎。你呢部咧？
得啦。唔知有冇睇唔到？Cap 圖嗰個有啦。
Cap 緊。
我剪落部機度。得唔得？最緊要你哋啦。係咪睇到你哋啊？
到。
喂 ，Hello Eddie。Hello. Glad to see you again.
See you as well.
Do you eat your meal or dinner?
I just ate actually.
Really?
今日食早少少 a little earlier.
未食啊！我哋呢邊。
未食早餐？
未啊。
咁 present 完先啦嚇。
呢邊阿 Jason。
June。
係啊。
係。
同你個同一時機。係。Hello Michael。
Hello.
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 Oh, good to see you, Eddie.
Good to see you as well, Dr. Iwama.
So we just
Hello,
waiting
Dr.
for...
Michael. How are you?
Oh, all the way from Melbourne, Australia?
Yes.
Yes,
That's
indeed.
amazing. Oh, Dr. Joaquin. Wow.
How are you, Doctor?
Yeah, good. Good to see you. My goodness.
Yes. It's
Am I
been a
ever
while.
happy? Yeah. Well, I'm really excited for these wonderful people over at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. I think that this is another landmark event, and I just feel so honored to be able to listen and to participate. And I hope that I think that their names are, is it Jason and June?
Yes.
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 Hello.
I hope that-
Hello. I'm
Yeah,
June and he is Jason.
Yeah, I'm Jason.
Yeah. I hope that please don't be nervous.
Mm.
Yeah, you're
Sure.
amongst many friends here.
So, Michael, do you expect anyone to you introduce themselves right here, or do you have any words to giving you, to us before the presentation?
So some words before
The
the
presentation.
presentation.
Do you have any expectation for these students in using the Kawa model in Hong Kong right now?
Yeah. So do you want me to share those ideas after the presentation or right now?
Maybe you can give some of our feedback after presentation, or you can share anything that's in the beginning. That's all right.
Okay. So just for the beginning part, I want to just say that I'm very, very impressed by the work that Jason and June have done here. I think that you are understanding very clearly what the next step of the Kawa model is.
Mm.
Okay, so the next step is that we want practitioners to be able to take the Kawa model and to adapt it, to change it, to be as helpful and meaningful as possible to your clients.
Mm.
And so this is what you've done. In fact, you are going to share a case study on how you have adapted the Kawa model to help people who are elderly and are at a different, shall we say, their rivers are at a different place compared to many other people. And I love the way that you have found new concepts in Chinese language and Chinese culture, such as the fountain, or the idea of thousands of rivers. And I think that these are really, really great examples that show your insight into the power of the Kawa model metaphor. And so I encourage you to build on what you have done with your presentation and to continue to ask the very important questions about how relevant and meaningful is our service as occupational therapists to the people in our own communities and in our own families, in our own countries. So I want to congratulate you for the important work that you've done. I think that if I was your professor and I had to give you a grade, I would give you an A+ right now.
Thank you.
And I also realize that, I cannot speak Cantonese. I cannot speak Putonghua. And so I know that this is extraordinary for you to be able to communicate also in English. I appreciate it.
Yes, so maybe we can start the presentation right now. So,
Today's presentation is Encounter and Empower Gray Hair Life Refer. First, we would like to introduce the general picture of the gray hair population in Hong Kong. Actually, in Hong Kong, we are also facing the aging problem. But the elderly in Hong Kong is not happy at all, despite they have a long life expectancy. So why is the difference? The difference is occupational dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because there are numerous factors affecting their occupation, and because occupation is largely influenced to well-being. So why the Kawa model?
And there are three major reasons for why we choose Kawa model as our final case presentation. Because the first reason is that it is a cultural sensitive model. Although Hong Kong now is a multicultural city, but our elderly adopt a traditional Chinese thinking thought, and also they adopt a strong collective cultural identities, and also, individual and life experience are part of an inseparable whole. And other reason is that it is a field of life from Kant's perspective. Just like Bruce Lee once said, that he said we need to be water. So we need to be water and go into the life river of the clients, and it is just a sharing of life story from our clients, and it is a good way to get connected with the clients. And also what Dr. Iwama always tell us, clients are the theorists and we are the students. We are always need to ask questions to understand more about the client. And also, the clients give the symbolic meanings on different items in the river. And last one is that river as metaphor is very easy to understand. It is just a simple image encountered in daily lives. Even the elderly with limited cognitive abilities or visual impairment, they can still understand and imagine their life river with appropriate adaptation. For example, my client is living in Guangzhou previously, then I suggest her to imagine the Canton River where she lived near before. And the last reason is that life is like a river. The Kawa model does not only focus in the cross-sectional view of the life, but a longitudinal view of life. So we believe that life is a dynamic process, and there are always interaction between the past, current, and future life events. Just like our clients, they are now situated in the lower course of the river, and there is a great influence of the past experience in their life. And also in the Erickson stage of psychosocial development, they are now in the integrity versus despair. Did I live a meaningful life when I look back the long river? It is the major question they are asking themselves. And the Kawa model takes consideration on the longitudinal view, which is extremely important in occupational profile analysis.
After applying Kawa model, which is a culturally sensitive model in Hong Kong, a society influenced by traditional Chinese culture, we have some new perspectives on Kawa model in Chinese culture. The first one is an idiom of sea accepts hundreds of rivers, in Cantonese 海納百川, and is a metaphor of a great person should be inclusive. In the view of occupational science, human is an occupational being. Even everyone has their own river. In nature, all rivers flow from up to down and to sea. In Chinese culture, it is viewed from another perspective that not rivers flow to sea, but sea accepts rivers. We will view sea as the occupational therapist who should accept and equally treat every client, no matter how limited the river flow is or how tortuous the river is. Occupational therapists should have love to accept, to embrace, and to treat every client equally. For example, I encountered a client who did not trust my role as a student therapist. Who can help her? Despite the disengagement, I still accept her, talk to her, and listen to her. Even torturous river seems to be avoided, flowing into sea. Sea always accepts her. Another perspective will have three words: non-self, Zen, and flow. Non-self is a concept in Buddhism. Buddhism suggests self is exclusive from the external world. Body and mind. Body is just a medium for us to interact with the external world. Whether mind is self or not is questionable. But Buddhism advocates that the only constant is change. Change is inevitable. Our mind is also changing. So is the mind in the moment before itself or in the moment after itself is questionable. Non-self suggests that there is no self in such a constantly changing world. And mind, right here, right now, is self. Based on the concept of non-self, Zen is developed. Zen is a meditative state of subjective experience. Sitting meditation is one of the practices to achieve Zen. Zen is very similar to the concept of flow developed by psychologists. Flow is closely related to occupational therapy because it focuses on a subjective state when one is totally immersed in an activity. Flow is named as a metaphor of water current carrying the one who is in the zone. In Kawa model, water is also used as a metaphor of life energy or life flow in longitudinal view, and the subjective experience of true self right here, right now, can be represented by the cross-sectional view. So my perspective in Chinese culture is that occupational therapy aims to enhance the life flow by engaging the client in a flow state throughout the use of activity. The last perspective is fountain, in Cantonese 涌泉, which appears in the Chinese title of today's sharing. Fountain occurs when two live rivers converge, join together. In nature, the interconnectedness of rivers is common. Similar to human society, we are all interconnected. Our life rivers are all interconnected. When we come across with each other, our life rivers converge, and it leaves fountain as a metaphor of beautiful and irreplaceable memory. We'll share it more in the later part.
So, how can we encounter the life river and how can we apply the Kawa model in the clinical practice? So, we first try to summarize on how to encounter the life river of our clients in the field of OT process. The first step is to get into their life river. It is just like the initial interview, and we need to get connected to each other and engage the clients in the assessment and develop the therapeutic relationship. Then we can start flowing with their life river. It is just like the assessment and treatment planning in the OT process. We need to analyze the Kawa model and prioritize the problems. Last is come to enable and empower the life river. It is just like the treatment implementation. We need to collaborate with our clients to maximize the water flow. So it's come to getting into their life river. There are different ways of practice. We need to give special thanks to Zhang Youxin, who gave us a great guideline on the application of Kawa model into occupational therapy clinical practice. As mentioned before, we can use the clinical interview to explore their life river. We should not use the structured interview question but some leading question to initiate the discussion. Another way is to visualize or draw the own life river. Before this, we should get the clients familiar with the metaphor first. However, there are no strict boundaries or the definition of the components in the river. The clients can provide their own interpretation on their drawing. The last way is to combine the objective assessment with the subjective Kawa model. Through analysis of the Kawa model, we can choose appropriate objective assessment tool according to client's need. For example, my clients think that feeling anxious is a big rock. Then we can choose back anxiety scale as an objective assessment for further investigation. So how can we flow with the life river? We should use a narrative approach to analyze the occupational profile. As mentioned before, we sometimes over-label ourselves as therapists. We are responsible for identifying problems, prioritize them, and select appropriate treatment. In this clinical experience, we learned that we should use a narrative approach to see all the stuff. For example, the clients can draw different sizes of rocks, and they will help us to interpret and prioritize their rocks. So how can we enable their life river? We think that an important consideration is collaboration. So what is our role as a therapist in the process? Are we a boss to manipulate our clients to perform in the design treatment? Or are we a leader to take the lead and help the clients to make decisions? We think that both are not describing what collaboration is. Collaboration consists of bilateral and mutual relationship. Bilateral relationship is that the clients can bring their life experience, feelings, and problems encountered to us, and we bring the professional knowledge to our clients as an experience. And next come to the mutual relationship, which means that there is equal power between the clients and therapists. We need to engage together in the OT process. For example, we can provide choices of different intervention, activity, and sequence to the clients. The clients are responsible to choose the one they want to engage in. So, it's come to our case sharing session. We would like to share 2 cases with all of you. And I will be the first one to share my case, and Jason will be the next. I'm so angry and worried about the thief. They steal my daily necessities, food and clothes. I can't sleep well. It is the exact wordings from Mrs. A. Here is the real life story of Mrs. A. Fear of the dark. When I first met with Mrs. A, my first impression to her is just like this picture. In Cantonese term, is named 心頭大石. There is a big rock placed inside her heart chamber. In English, is an idiom, means know a lot of your mind. And I would like to walk into her life to see what is happening here to help her put down the rock which are deep inside her heart. Then I further explore Mrs. A occupational profile by asking her to share the life story and imagine her life as a reefer. And it is important to look at the life reefer as a longitudinal field because we need to look at how the past experience interact with her current condition. And you can see that here, during the World War II, the soldier destroyed their home and steal all the money. Meanwhile, her mother was kidnapped by the theft. She encountered many rocks at the teenager stage. The family was broken and she turned from rich to poor in a short period of time. So, since Mrs. A may have bad impression to the delusion of theft in the past, and I was wondering if there is a relationship with the delusion of theft which is presenting now with her bad experience in teenage. So in adulthood, she has a difficult life in Hong Kong because she is quite poor at that time and she needs to work hard to earn money. So there are few rocks in the adulthood also. And in around 40, her father and mother-in-law and husband passed away one after the other. She experienced grief and loneliness at that time. After a few more years, her daughter passed away because of cancer, and it makes her feel even more depressed and lonely. Why everyone gone and left her alone? She told me that it's sad when recalling the past. There are so many rocks in the life river at that time point, obstructing the river flow. The river bottom wall is continuously narrowing due to different relatives pass away one by one. And around 10 years ago, she became a Christian and she went back to church regularly. And it influenced how she feels life and afterlife now. And around 3 years ago, she came to the Kowloon home for the aged blind, and she always feels worried and angry about the theft. The staff have helped her to rearrange the room to another floor, but still, the theft are coming. So what is happening right now? Let's look at her life river in a cross-sectional view. So you can see that here there is a very big rock. She always feels angry and worries about things being stolen, and I interpret it as the worries extend from the delusion of theft. And the second biggest rock is poor sleeping quality. She cannot fall asleep easily at night and have insufficient sleep. It is not a problem which can be simply analyzed by a single perspective, but it is greatly affected by the anxiety of theft. The third rock is that she feels depressed when looking back about the past. she doesn't understand why everyone left her alone. There are some other rocks such as visual impairment and also neck pain, feeling bored, and need to walk with sticks. And rocks are of different size according to the importance and influence from Khan's perspective. And for driftwood, she identified as personal attribute and experience. So there are lots of driftwood, for example, sociable, talkative, Christian, active participation, and so on. And I will further elaborate it in the treatment implementation process. And also, the ribbon bottom consists of macro level and also micro level, such as her friends and relatives. As mentioned before, the Kawa model can help us to choose the best objective assessment suitable for the client. So after identifying her rocks such as feeling angry and worried about things being stolen, I further analyze it by the GAD-7 to check her level of anxiety. For the sleeping quality, I use a Huawei Fitbit to monitor her sleeping. And for the driftwood of fair memory, I used the Hong Kong Mocha VI version to further check her ability. And actually, she performed very well in the memory part, extremely in the immediate recall and also delayed recall. And lastly, as she identified herself as a Christian and also past interest as cooking, I further analyzed it using the interest checklist. And here come to the problem identification and prioritization again. And it is truly from Kant's perspective according to the size of the rocks. So here come to the treatment implementation. After couples of weeks, we have already built a good therapeutic relationship and we actively engage and collaborate together in the treatment. And I have provided several choices for my clients to choose and take reference, then we design the treatment plan together. So, the treatment aims to facilitate the clients to achieve occupational balance. According to Wilcock, a balance of occupations leads to well-being. Enabling occupational balance is just like maximizing the life flow. It is a state of well-being, while all elements coexist in the harmony in the life river. Occupational balance is described as balance between different occupational areas, patterns, roles, and satisfaction with it. You can see that in the left-hand side, actually my client was in a stage of occupational imbalance. But after the lifestyle redesign, she can have improved quality of rest and sleep, have more opportunities in social participation and ideal activities, and she can pursue her leisure activities and religious activity. And I will show you how Mrs. A participates in different occupations in next few slides. So the first one is the religious activity. I originally, before Mrs. A go to KHAB, she go to church on every Wednesday. However, she has limited opportunities to go to church again. And I listened to my client's wish and promised that I will bring her to church one time. I go to the church with the client and participate in the worship and group sharing session. After it, she develops habits of praying every day, morning and night. And she tried to learn from God. I always ask her, don't be worried, and you can tell the worries to the God. And this is just an adaptive coping skills of the clients. Before going to church, my clients used to express her anger and also worries using rude words, and actually it creates noise to the neighbor. But after that, she can develop an adaptive coping skills and learn how to forgive the theft as Jesus. The rocks that is feeling angry and worries about things being stolen is decreasing in size, and the driftwood Christian can help her to remove the rocks. And Mrs. A have participated in a cooking group, which is organized by me with other elderly in a group of 4. The group aims to enable the elderly to perform in their past occupation, which is cooking, as most of them are either housewife or cooking in the restaurant. So there are totally 4 sessions. The first sessions, they can just explore and learn how to distinguish the seasonings and ingredients. Then they can learn how to boil dumplings, and they can self-make dumplings, and last, they can serve for the others. So some elderly always think that it is they are the burden and they need to wait for the people serve. But indeed, they can serve for the peoples also. So here, we try to modify the driftwood from the decreased confidence on her ability to increase confidence to her ability and provide some successful experience to her. And also, Mrs. A expressed her wants to me. She wants to buy biscuits from the supermarket, and it makes a good chance for me to provide an opportunity for her to engage in some ideal activity. And I arranged an outing for Mrs. A. And for the money management part, she can perform in simple calculation, and she recognizes of coins and banknotes. And then we can perform shopping in the supermarket. So she have increased confidence on her ability because she realized that actually different sense can be used. Her ability is not limited by vision. And besides, I bring my professional knowledge to Mrs. A and suggest her to use the progressive muscle relaxation and diaphragmatic breathing to lengthen the muscle and also relieve the muscle tension and also to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So she listened to my opinions, and I perform 2 sessions with her every week before she leaves, and she is able to remember the steps of practice and generalize it into daily practice. And we want to cooperate together to decrease the size of the rocks, poor sleeping quality. And the last one is the life refill therapy. And I perform 2 sessions weekly to Mrs. A to discuss the past events, and including the happy memory and also the unhappy one. And it is in order to increase her self-acceptance of life and brings the positive emotion towards life, and also cooperate together to solve the unsolved conflicts in the past, including the death of husband and daughter. So we try to enlarge the bottom wall with a bottom, that is the husband and daughter which has passed away, and also to reduce the size of the rocks that is feeling depressed when talking about the past. So here is the treatment outcome. It is difficult to quantify the treatment outcome, but the truth is I can see my client is actually living better with enlarged river flow. And I would like to see that she can put down the large rock that is her Samtao die set in the future, and I would like to see she can achieve occupational balance, the state when every elements in the river coexist in the harmony. And here, and I have finished my case sharing, and I would like to pass the time to Jason to share his case to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, June, for the sharing of the life story of Mr. A. I'm going to share the life story of Mr. B. When I applied Kawa model on Mrs. B, I faced the first obstacle that the metaphor of river did not resonate with her. She did not understand the metaphor of river and night flow, and it may be due to the meaninglessness of river to her, or a high demand of abstract thinking ability. Since Mrs. B mentioned fate before, and fate is a common concept in traditional Chinese culture, I used fate as a metaphor of life flow to apply Kawa model. In traditional Chinese culture, fate is already determined at birth by what one had done in the previous life. Fate can be somehow altered by some methods, such as fortune telling or feng shui. After using the metaphor of fate to help her narrate, she can describe her fate flow more easily. Apart from that, when she mentioned about fate, I could sense her locus of control is external, that she felt her life is out of her control. This is the cross-sectional view of Mr. B's river at that moment. The first we can see is the biggest rock in the middle. Loneliness, as a narrator, was the largest impediment to her life flow. Why the rock of loneliness was so huge? River occupies space as well as time. So I think it's important to analyze from both cross-sectional and longitudinal views. Mr. B is 89 years old and born in 1930. She described her life as ups and downs. During her childhood, the family was separated due to war. It was the first time she experienced the loss of significant others. Kawa model does take the influence of past life journey into account, viewing one's life in a holistic approach, be it cross-sectional or longitudinal. When it comes to her 20s, she met her husband and it was the happiest period of time in her life. The water flowed without any big rocks in a wide river. Unfortunately, her husband passed away in a road traffic accident. It was the second loss of significant others to her. The rock of loneliness in the middle of river started to appear and will become greater throughout the rest of her life. When we look back to her current cross-sectional river, the loss of her husband, which is deep in the river wall, contributed to the rock of loneliness. The rock of loneliness was already present but small in size in her 30s. When she was 86 years old, that was 3 years ago, she moved to KHAB. Moving into elderly's home is common in Hong Kong, but almost all of the gray hair would not willing to. In Chinese culture, home is an important concept, and the gray hair would like to be aging in place. Moving into KHAB further enlarged the symbol of loneliness. And in Hong Kong, a capitalist society, long working hour, low minimum wage, and high living costs, that is the river bottom, have made the living of her daughter hard. Her daughter, as a carer of her, had to work even harder because she had to take care of her sons after divorce. Her daughter had no chance but to send Mr. Speed to KHAB, and her daughter visits her nest because of work recently. The work of loneliness was further enlarged. So I would like to acknowledge the importance of cultural and societal events on Mr. Speed River in the light of the Kawa model. 3 months ago, she has been moved from 5th floor to 7th floor, and currently she described the water flow now is most obstructive because she could not live with her friend. By looking back to the cross-sectional river, the system in the elderly home here became the barriers for Mrs. B to meet her friend again. She could not leave or even visit her friend freely because of the system and her physical weakness. Let's look at the group of driftwood and the rocks above it on the left-hand side. The impairment itself did not directly pose an effect on social isolation nor induce a feeling of loneliness. But because of no self-confidence, Mrs. B viewed herself as a disabled, underprivileged, and unloved person, and this maladaptive self-concept influenced her behaviors such that she would not participate in social activity. As a written metaphor, the negative thinking of I cannot do anything well is the branch of the driftwood of self-confidence. She attributed the incapacity to her impairments. Now, in the view of occupational therapy, the gray hair can still participate despite the works of impairment through remediation, compensation, or adaptation. Back to the river, the rocks of impairments she perceived as permanently impedmental lie above the driftwood of self-confidence. The impairments then truly became a threat to her self-confidence. Since the prioritized work is loneliness, the goal is to enhance her life flow through social participation. In this society of collectivism, the concept of belonging, being, and doing is adopted. Chinese culture values on social roles. For example, filial piety in Chinese culture is fundamental virtue. As a son and daughter of a family, the responsibility is to respect, support, and care their parents, especially when their parents are aged. People who do not take well care of their parents will be labeled as immoral. Mrs. B was cast out of her social circles and lost her identities as wife, mother, and friend, so she felt no reason to be here and engaged passively. The intervention adopted the concept of belonging, being, and doing to motivate her to engage in social activity again by emphasis of her role as friend. She expressed the feeling of missing her old friend to meet her again because her ability in mobility and more importantly, the system engaged AB. The driftwood of her memory of her old friend living in fifth floor is restricted in the river wall because they cannot meet independently in macro level, and in micro level is that they cannot change the room as they wanted freely in the system. By moving out the driftwood with the help of another driftwood of talkativeness, the river wall can be expanded and water can flow more to erode the rock of loneliness. For example, to help her prepare social meeting, we anticipated what we would do together with her friend and reinforce her self-efficacy by emphasizing her assets of talkativeness. To create a chance and expand the river wall for enhancing water flow, Mrs. B was able to meet her old friend in fifth floor with assistance in wheelchair mobility. During the meeting, they talked excitedly with satisfaction. At that moment, the water flow increased largely. And after meeting, she realized that there was someone still cared her. And we discussed making a gift for her old friend. The driftwood of self-confidence was laid below the rocks of impairments and became impediment to water flow. To break through this situation, water flow was enhanced through the activity of arts and crafts. The water flew and moved the driftwood. Once the driftwood is moved, the space for water flow will be enlarged. And the souvenir is meaningful to her because we use hand rubbed with her favorite color to win a round on a card to form her nickname. Her nickname belongs to their friendship only. And in the process, adaptive thinking was constructed, and she can complete the task that she felt it was impossible to complete. By overcoming the rock of impairment, she felt more confident. In the process, the meaning of their friendship was acknowledged. Social interaction is limited in the environment because of the system and their disability. To achieve the engagement in new social circle, the driftwood of passive in initiating talks should be moved for allowing the free flow of driftwood of talkativeness be known. The reason why the near river wall is left blank is due to an unexpected event. The environment is changing constantly, being it under control or out of control. We were having 4 sections of flower group, including Mr. B and another client, Mr. C, who was living in 6th floor. They had little interaction at the beginning. But it all came out of expectation that Mr. C moved from 6th floor to Mrs. B's room. I found it was an excellent chance to enhance the water flow by expanding the river wall, that is to introduce them they are living in the same room during the group session. And before the contact, Mrs. B was anxious and had some concerns, and during the group, their seats were arranged sitting together and they were introduced to each other. After knowing they were in the same room and coincidentally met here, their live rivers joined together and formed a fountain. I had never seen that happy united affair of Mr. B until that moment. They also named their relationship as a labor, which is a social role in Chinese culture. They belong to this neighborhood. The time stopped at that time, and the water flow was the climax with a beautiful fountain that lasted for permanent in such a flow state. To conclude, after free intervention, the huge rock of loneliness was reduced in size because of water flow was enhanced through social participation by moving the driftwood and expanding the river wall. River confluence is formed when 2 rivers join with each other. We are going to share what we have learned after encountering the cases. Fountain occurs when 2 rivers converge. Fountain is beautiful, raising above the river surface. River is a metaphor of life. When 2 lives encounter and join together, the influence from each other and to each other is the fountain, which is a beautiful and irreplaceable moment at that specific time point in life. It surely explores our interest in geometric fields just like in nature. When two rivers join together, the direction of the river will change, be it to a small or a large extent. The experience here changed the direction of our life river. We don't know how large the changes are, but we believe the experience here must have an influence to our future. The experience with Greek hair became our irreplaceable memory as a beautiful fountain. I think the previous moment was that she told me how satisfied when she met me. I also told her I was glad to meet her. The experience and moments with her were fountains. Throughout the 2 months, we have improved the knowledge and skills in applying Kawa model in clinical practice. We also gained some new perspectives on Kawa model in the context of Chinese culture that we shared before. It's important to put theory into practice, to put thinking into action. Most importantly, we have learned client-centered approach. By using a client-centered approach, we can know what is truly meaningful to the client, but not meaningful to the therapist. Kawa model is a model emphasizes the narratives of the clients. Clients themselves are the theorists of their life river. Occupational therapists get into, flow with, and empower the river of client in order to enhance water flow by joining hand with hand together. So that is the end of our sharing of power model based sharing. Thank you.
Um, so if there are any comments, feel free to share. Maybe you can just introduce yourself briefly before sharing the comments to us.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Eddie.
Hi, Eddie.
I was with Armstrong just a couple months ago,
Yes.
working with him. And it was such a good experience. I'm really glad that you also had hopefully a similar experience and ability to kind of see occupational therapy and occupation in general in a different way. I know in the U.S. a lot of times, because the U.S. is so big, there's so many different ways to approach OT. Sometimes there are areas of OT here where it starts to gear away from the occupation-based and more biomedical, which is seen very frequently in bigger hospitals. So it's really nice to hear about these occupation-focused approaches. So one thing I wanted to ask for both of you, I guess, is I noticed one of you were talking about the narrative aspects. How do you feel the narratives being able to provide either story-like or just being able to talk to the clients more? How do you feel that impacts your ability to provide services for them?
So thank you for your comments, Eddie. Actually, we have looked at your presentation last year also, and I think it is a really great presentation because you focus more about the conscious choice of the clients, and you really give a great opportunity or right for the clients to choose their own way of treatment, and we appreciate a lot also. So,
thank you.
and responding to your question, and do you mean so how we use a narrative approach to understand the client's life river? Do you mean the ways?
Yeah, I assume that you did, right? I assume that you gave them a lot of, I feel your approach is it is more client-centered, client-based. And so I'm wondering, during your time spent with the clients, how much impact have you seen that being able to talk to them, to hear their narratives? How much of an impact did that have compared to, let's say, if we were just giving them exercise?
Thank you. And I think when they narrate their life story, and because their life story is very meaningful to herself, because it is her life and it's not my life. And compared to exercise, exercise is not very meaningful to every client because I think the general picture of exercise is very uniform. And when we design some treatment or activities based on their narrative is meaningful. And so that the intervention is very meaningful. Just like when my client said that he wants to meet her friend again, so I think it's a good chance to arrange a session or provide some assistance and provide some social skill training to her such that the intervention themselves are very meaningful to her and it does help her to enhance the water flow. Yes.
And also for my clients, actually, I provide choices for her to choose what she want to do in the treatment session. And as mentioned before, actually, my clients develop maladaptive coping skills such as using rude word to scold their theft, and in order to express her anger. And I think the clients can find their own way to solve the problems, but not providing the ways or the coping skills for them. For example, I discussed with her, and she can figure out that actually praying to God is one adaptive coping skills for her to express her angers and worries. And it's so that is why I try to arrange an outing activity to go to the church with my clients in order to develop a closer relationship between the God and the clients. Yes, that is.
That's really a really great occupation focus there, and I think that keeping in mind the setting you're in, right? I think that there's so many opportunities in the residential setting that you're at to have the ability to give them choices, to work with them in different ways. Again, it is very different than if you were to work in acute hospital where they were just injured and they have to have exercise because maybe at that point that is the most important for them. But now that they're in a residential setting, that's basically their home. Why not give them an option, right? So I really like that approach that you guys have done so far, and I think that you have the right mindset to be able to provide the right type of support that all of these clients can benefit from.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
I have more, but I will let everyone else talk.
I just want to comment that I have a much I have a lot of things that I want to be able to share. So I will wait until a little bit later on so that we will give others a chance to comment. Okay.
okay,
So
sure. Are there any comments?
Maybe we can just share some feelings, especially essential right here. Do you have any expectation for the new generation of therapists that's using the car model in China? And I'm so glad to see you right here. Here for a long time no see, Christopher. Is that so?
Hi. Sorry. There is some maybe technical problem, so I missed the first 30 minutes. So I don't know how to comment for your presentation.
Just share your
Sure,
experience
it's
is
okay.
enough.
Yes.
Yeah. But I just wondering, when you use the Kawa model to work with your clients, how they feel about that kind of process. And the second question would be, do you have any plan to use Kawa model group, in a group, maybe in your institution, and yeah.
I think when I use the Kawa model in clinical practice, in my approach, I try to use the leading question in the interview to initiate a discussion on different components in the refer. And, and I know that there is a guideline. I take reference as for the guideline that is the Zhang Youxin provide us how to apply the Kawa model in clinical practice. And it is a great guideline, and after using those leading questions, actually my clients can easily express her feels towards the rocks and driftwood, and I also try to use another approach that is ask my clients to visualize their life river, and I just use this metaphor and because because I think that the metaphor of river is actually easily to understand because it is just an image from daily life, so that my clients, although she has visual impairment, she can still imagine the life river using the river that is familiar with her to express the river in a longitudinal field. So I think that actually Kawa model is easy to understand because it's a simple metaphor. And another another advantage I would like to say is that it provides us a way to get engaged with the clients easily because it is just like an approach to listen to their life story. So it is a good way to build the therapeutic relationship and rapport using the Kawa model.
And I think apart from the meaningfulness of the metaphor of river to the clients, I think more importantly is the how I share my life river to the client as well, because we are in the talks, in the interaction and conversation, and we share our life story to the client, and the client can share her life story to me. I mean, this interaction is actually touching lives and making some impacts to her life and to my life as well. And through this interaction, the sharing of both life refer, I think the therapeutic, I think the rapport can build very easily because we just like listening to each other life stories, and it's very narrative in nature. And I think the approach I used was can motivate the client to participate in the further assessment or intervention. And for the question about the group session, I think we can actually apply Kawa model in a group session. But I think more importantly, the client themselves need to be very familiar with each other such that they can share their own life story, life journey in such a group. Because I think some people may think that life river is very sensitive and may not very willing to share with in a social circle. So I think if we need to apply Kawa model in a group, I think we need to they need to be familiar with each other first. Thank you.
I totally agree with your opinion because one of my previous fieldwork students, he tried to apply Kawa model in one of the group for elders with dementia, and he found that something a little bit difficult to understand different works and how to use that kind of a metaphor style to describe their feeling or their life story. So that's why I'm wondering if there are similar experience or maybe from your clinical experience, would I mean so that's why I feel curious about if it apply in a group style. Is that happen also in Hong Kong or
Actually, I think that in the future we can indeed try to apply the Kawa model in a group approach because I think that there are actually advantage of applying the Kawa model in group approach because the clients can especially when they have similar clinical conditions. For example, what you say that the student tried to apply the group for the elderly with dementia. So I think that if the clients actually share the similar condition and they can share their life story and also the cross-sectional view of the river to other group mates, then they can understand more about what is happening and in other lives that is with dementia, so they can feel less lonely and they can understand that they actually have other partner and in the OT process. Yeah, so I actually will consider it to apply in the future, but at this time point, I think it is quite difficult to apply it in this setting because many elderly have visual impairment, so it is quite difficult for them to draw their life river by themselves and or independently and then share the river to the others. So I prefer using some clinical interview in this setting, but indeed I think it is a good approach to try on in the future.
Thank you for your response.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Actually, I'm totally agree with Essential that we need to pay some more attention if the client is cannot make their choice, especially for those with dementia. This is the same process that I come across with Eddie before. When we apply the Kawa model for those persons who may lose their cognitive ability or lose their ability to pick up the most suitable selection, the therapist should be much more sensitive or much more clear about the treatment objective. Otherwise, we may filter off or just project the things that we want to do, but not the kind want to do. Maybe we have a discussion at the before how we can make better use of this Kawa model on those person with lose of some cognitive or pick up their bad wishes in the treatment courses. Thank you, Essential.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, hi. It's me again. I have one more comment and question about occupational balance. So as people, we're all limited to how much we can do, but I think that there's always room for growth, right? So there's always the ability for us to be able to grow, and so I find that the Kawa model has that great aspect where the river's never limited. You can always flow in different directions. You can erode. The banks can get bigger. Rocks can get bigger or smaller. And so I think there's a lot of room for growth. I personally don't use the word balance. I'm thinking, what do you guys think about the word? I know one of you used the word harmony. And the reason I like the word occupational harmony a little bit better is because balance makes it sound like you have to make sure it's equal. And it doesn't, I don't think there's a necessity for there to always have a balance. It has to be harmony. When it's in harmony, it means it works no matter how the balance is. I feel that when you find a balance with your clients, whether it's in a group or in one-on-one sessions, when you find that harmony with them, then I feel that's the most optimized. What are your thoughts? I like to hear your thoughts.
Yes, actually, I share the similar view with you. So that is why I think that I just use occupational balance to as a framework as my sorry. I try to share with you the occupational balance is just like what Kawa model said. It is just like a harmony when when different components coexist in the river, and it is just like the occupational balance. Because in traditional OT approach, we always hear that occupational balance is a balance between some occupation and also the performance pattern and role and also task satisfaction with their occupations. I think so. I think that these two terms are very similar. It is similar with the river when each component in the river exists in a harmony. That is the river bottom, the rocks, and also the water flow is maximized.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just add a comment with regard to the issue around the concept of balance, and especially with regard to occupational balance? Back before I developed the Kawa model, I was examining very critically from a social science perspective some of the concepts that we hold to be so sacred within the profession of occupational therapy. And as I began to really study occupational therapy theory, I found that there were many cultural assumptions that were built into the concepts of our models. And one of them, of course, is the most sacred concept of all, which is occupation. But when we encounter ideas around balance from a human occupation viewpoint, I think back to the earlier writings of Gary Kielhofner. And when we look at the original rendition of the model of human occupation, and by the way, if you really want to understand models in occupational therapy, don't just examine the most recent or newest version of that model. Go back to its origins and find the original one, and you'll understand the theory or the theoretical framework much more clearly. Back when Dr. Kielhofner was formulating his ideas around human occupation, heavily influenced by Mary Riley's work on around the occupational behavior paradigm. There was interesting language that found its way into the model of human occupation. And it had to do with what was the most advanced, popular theoretical ideas of the day. And in the case of people that were situated in North America, the field of psychology was making some very, very rapid gains in their theory development. So when Dr. Kielhofner was putting his ideas together, we had, for example, at Iowa and at Stanford University, Albert Bandura talking about his ideas around self-efficacy, and Abraham Maslow, his ideas around motivation, and of course Talcott Parsons and Ludwig van Bertalanffy in the fields of sociology and biology, talking about general systems theory. And Piaget and Erickson, of course, were advancing their ideas on cognitive development, and so on and so forth, as well as Carl Rogers at Columbia University, as a psychiatrist who was talking about ideas around client-centered therapy. Okay, so all of these concepts that we've found ourselves in our occupational therapy theory, they didn't come from heaven. They came from what was the most contemporary or believable Chisho, can you mute your microphone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
no. Yeah, I can hear you, but can you mute?
Okay.
Okay. So back to the idea, the talk on human occupation. Balance was talked about in a very individual-centric way, in that it was an assumption that a person was experiencing well-being if he was able to exert control over his environment, control over, to be independent, for example, in our social and physical environment, meant that we were in an adaptive state. And we were considered to be in a maladaptive state if the balance with the environment was skewed and that the environment was exerting more control over us. So we then began to talk about words like ability and disability and occupational balance. Back then, the idea around occupational balance had very much to do with assumptions around the person's ability to control their environment. And so when we think about China, Hong Kong, Japan, other parts of the world where the ethos of everyday life, the way that we have learned to look at the world and ourselves, is not so individual-centric like it is in the birthplace of many of these ideas where occupational therapy came from. Some people have said that China, Japan, East Asia is very much more structured along a more collectivist or group-oriented, family-oriented kind of way of seeing reality. And I would just want to add to that, that it goes beyond that, that it goes to the sense that we are inseparably bound to nature. That's the basis of the Kawa model, right? Where all things are connected. You cannot separate these things apart. If you change one part of the river, the whole river changes. In the same way, we, I believe, we have learned a very fundamentally different way of viewing ourselves vis-a-vis the environment. And so I think that, the Kawa model is radically different because it doesn't subscribe to the basic assumption that the individual is the center of the universe and that the individual should be in control of the environment. I just love the fact that in your presentation, Jason and June, that, you really demonstrated that you really understand the essence of the Kawa model. And how I know that is that when you talk about the interventions that you choose for your clients that are there in Hong Kong, these people that are elderly, the interventions are not all centered on the individual. You've just automatically, naturally moved to looking at ways in which the social environment and the physical environment can be equally brought into play with regard to helping the person be able to participate in everyday life, right? So you're already naturally moving with your own culturally appropriate views of reality and the world. And so I think that you've really demonstrated a different kind of balance. It's not so much the occupational balance that was talked about by Wilcock and others, okay? Because that is very much coming from an individual-centric view of occupation, of the person, me, being able to do what I want to do. In Asia, so many people see themselves as inseparably blended with the environment. And so therefore, the harmony, I believe, is a wonderful word. Harmony between the self and one's circumstances and one's environment is much more helpful and meaningful to your clients with gray hair, not just with gray hair, but with most people who see the world in that kind of way. So I want to congratulate you, June and Jason, for really understanding the Kawa model. I was just so impressed by your presentation because you're not following models like a recipe or some kind of framework that has only one correct way of being able to use it. You understand the power of metaphor, and you know that the Kawa model is not anything really impressive. It's just a metaphor, and how we have taken the metaphor to be able to use it in the ways that we can with our background and training in occupational therapy to help people achieve a greater harmony with their circumstances and with their world, right? Okay. Sorry about that. I was very long, but I have other comments that I will share with you once I give the microphone back to everybody else.
Thank you, Dr. Iwama.
Hello.
Hello.
Jason June.
Hello, we can hear. Yes.
This is Joaquin Benedicto from Melbourne. I would like to congratulate you on a wonderful presentation, and I totally agree with Dr. Iwama's comment that you have truly understood the model, and you have effectively demonstrated it in your presentation, and really wonderful job. Convergence of two souls. That is a really powerful idea as well. Thank you so much. And it's a great pleasure to be here today. Thanks.
Thank you.
I think it's amazing, by the way, that your presentation is being accessed from all over the world. When I think about Eddie, I think he's in Los Angeles, and Shinsho Essential is in Taiwan, and Joaquin Benedicto is in Melbourne. I think that Kavita Murthy and Neha Tripathi, which is with us, they're located also in the United States. This is really quite a nice gathering of people from around the world.
And thank you very much. And I think we really actually learn a great lesson here. And after Dr. Iwama sharing, I now understand more about occupational balance and why harmony is indeed a better word to use to describe the state of my clients. And I think another thing I want to add is that I really think that Kawa model, the most inspiring part to me is that there are no boundaries, there are no strict boundaries of the metaphor, of the life reference. So I do not need to just follow the instructions of the model, but I can use the model freely and just discuss and to know more about the life story of my clients instead of following some strict instructions. So I think it is also a great part of Kawa model.
And I also at some point, I very agree with Dr. Iwama, and it makes me think of a Chinese idiom. 天人合一 is a Chinese idiom that suggests sky and man become the one. And it acknowledges the influence of environment on one's well-being and occupation. I think the influence of environment is large because especially in Eastern culture. And I also add some point of Kawa model is very meaningful to each client because Kawa model is just like a metaphor, and everyone's interpretation is very different, and such that the main core values of Kawa model is in its concept. Just like Dr. Iwama said that the concept is environment and human is blended together. I think this concept is very important that we can apply Kawa model to different every client. Thank you.
Yes, And I will echo your words in saying that it is correct when you use the Kawa model to assume that the client is the theorist. And we become students of that theorist's model that explains their experience of everyday life. And you can see how that contrasts with the way that we usually use models in occupational therapy, especially in North America or in the English-speaking world, because we will often, of course, regard the theorist of the model as the theorist. And we all, of course, become students of that model, and then we implement that model and in effect apply the model to all of our clients in a very similar kind of way. This model changes the power dynamic. Instead of pushing ideas onto the client, it turns it around and makes the client powerful. And it makes their story, their narrative, the center of the universe. And from there, we look at the possibilities that occupational therapy can give to be helpful. Instead of just going in right away powerfully and applying ideas around occupational therapy in a universal kind of way. Okay.
If I can add something, I think that, as Dr. Iwama was saying earlier, the fact that we have the ability to make changes and to continue furthering all of the models as well as just the ideas of occupational therapy and occupational science, that's really the goal, right? We don't want to ever be feeling like we're stagnant. We want to continue growing. And so I feel with your mindset and your ability to understand the Kawa model allows you to continue that change for the Kawa model, for occupational therapy. And I think that's important, is that you don't take it as a model that never changes. It should change. It should continue to grow. And that's always the goal in my belief, as occupational therapists. We should always continue to hope for growth and for improvements. So one thing I really wanted to point out, or actually to ask you guys with regards to the idea of the groups that I think Essential was talking about, to be able to run groups for Kawa model, I think there are certain challenges that are inevitable because there seems to be involving a lot more personal and a lot more sensitive information, because that's the nature of how the Kawa model runs. It would be interesting, though, to see if it could work, because I was thinking about, I think it was it Jason who was talking about providing equal services to all the clients? I don't remember who it was, but that was very interesting, because I remember reading somewhere for one of my classes a couple of years ago, the idea of 3 words in occupational therapy was equity, equality, and justice. And so equity means everyone gets the same thing. Does that work? Maybe for some people, but if it's all equal, it might not work for everyone, because everyone's different, right? Equality means that we will try to make sure that everyone ends up being equal. It means that we provide different services to each person that we interact with, so that they can all reach their goals. That's the equality part. That works very well, but it takes a lot of effort from us, right? We have to tailor it very individually for each person so that it works for everyone. In a group setting, that makes it very difficult, because we only have one of us, maybe an assistant, and then we have to run a group, maybe with 3 to 5, maybe even more people. And that's hard when we have to individualize. So then it comes to the last term that I remember reading, and it really, really helped me to think about how groups can be run, is justice. So what does justice, occupational justice in that sense, can mean? Can we change something where it can help everyone all at the same time to reach all their goals without having to do it individually? Can we change the environment? Can we change something that affects the way that everyone sees or receives the treatment? So that's going a little bit bigger than just the individual now. We're interacting with the nature or the environment. I think one of the examples that I remember reading was everyone going to watch a baseball game. Okay, there's a little kid, there's like a normal sized kid, and then a really tall kid, and then there's a fence. There's like a wall. So the little kid can't see over the wall because he's too short. So if we all give them like a small block to see, they can all step on it. The tall one doesn't need it, right? He already has the block. He doesn't need it because he's already tall, so he doesn't need the block. But the middle guy can see now because he has the block. The little one just can't see it still because he's too short. And so it's like the idea is, well, if we give them all the same thing, it doesn't mean that they will all improve to the point where they reach their goals. If we give them different size blocks, yeah, they will be able to see it, right? If you give the tallest block to the little one, he'll be able to see. But what if we just change the wall and make it into a fence? So now that everyone can just see, right? So it's something that you change in the environment can have a big impact that can maybe solve a lot of the issues of not necessarily needing to do the individual aspects. So that was really interesting because I thought about that, like, oh, groups, are great. They give a lot of interaction to a lot of people. But then you can think about, okay, now how do I run the groups so that everyone can benefit still and to the point where they're reaching their goals? So that's something to think about. I don't think that there's no solution, right? I'm not giving you a solution. It's just an idea that I think can be worthwhile to think about. How can we apply the Kawa model in a group if we can use the environment to our advantage?
Thank you,
Can I
Eddie.
You were just going to say something, Jason?
And I also think that at this point about justice is a very great idea, and occupational therapists can provide intervention that tailor-made for every client is the essence of occupational therapy because the tailor-made and the meaningfulness is very unique in occupational therapies. But the point of justice requires the ability to think out of the box and creativity. I think it's the most important part to be an occupational therapy and provide creative treatment on modifying the environment to provide a justice way for every client. So thank you.
Can I just add that, I believe that most of our concepts and words are socially constructed or manufactured, and that it would be very interesting for people in Hong Kong, like June and Jason, to reflect on whether your view of the meaning of justice and the structure of justice is similar to the way that we talk about justice on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. Okay? Like, as I said before, when we don't even question the individual-centric nature of our view of the world, I guess what I'm trying to say is that whether it's occupation or whether it's about the concept of a river or whether it's about the justice, I think it'd be very interesting to look at how traditional Chinese culture looks at the issue around what is fair and what isn't fair. I mention this because I spent many years, of course, living in Japan. And the concept of justice is so different because we have adapted into Japan the ideas that came from China around Confucianism and filial piety, where where the society is, we learn it to be structured hierarchically. There is no such thing as everyone being equal. In Japanese society, some people are more equal than other people. And in other Asian spheres, the higher a person is in age, the more respect that they're given, and the more rights that they have. So I think that, again, we should take a critical, we should question all of the ideas that we learn, and especially those ideas that we have imported from other cultural locations, and to really look at the culture of your client. Really, that's the key behind the Kawa model, is to try to grasp, to comprehend, to understand, and how to even love the client's story of their life and their experience of everyday life. So, I just think that you understand the Kawa model and how it applies to your own cultural setting. I want to just, I wanted to say something, but maybe what I want to say is this, is that you have a very exciting road ahead of you, because you're taking not just the idea of the Kawa model, but you're also taking ideas around occupational therapy. And by looking at your community, by looking at your clients, and the world of shared experiences that you have there, I want you to know that you have my permission and encouragement to now develop the Kawa model in a distinctively Chinese or Guangdong way of everyday life. Okay? The Kawa model, for it to be useful and powerful, it needs to be adapted and changed in ways that are going to serve your people the best. Okay, now I thought about what I was going to say. The idea around dementia and cognitive problems and the difficulties in using the Kawa model in this way. Here is a really great way for you to innovate ways to change the Kawa model for people in Hong Kong. And that is, question our concept of client. Does the client have to be an individual? Does it have to be one person? Have we just assumed that the client is an individual? Because those ideas, they came from another world where it's just, yeah, of course, the client is an individual. But I've used the Kawa model in Japan, and I've found the most powerful ways that the Kawa model is used is when they're used with families or when they're used with groups of people. They then become the client. So the client doesn't have to be an individual, but it can actually be a group of people, especially those people who love that person. Let's say that grandmother has dementia and doesn't know how to even pick up a pencil or to reflect on their life journey. They can't even remember some of that stuff. But maybe the people that love her, her sons, her daughters, her grandchildren, and others that really want the best for her can come together, and they can make one river, and they will call it Grandma's River, to get the best ideas about what the circumstance, what the experience in the here and now looks like, so that then you can then partner together with the entire family and say, I think we should do this, or I think we should use this assessment or this treatment or this. Yeah? So explore and don't worry if you think, oh, maybe Dr. Iwama doesn't think that this is a correct way for using the Kawa model. No. Look at your clients. Serve your clients and think of ways to make the metaphor work for everybody, right? Okay. I have one more lesson that I want to share with you, but again, I don't want to take up all of the time here. But these are just words of encouragement that I wanted to just give to you. Okay. So I'll just pause.
Thank you, Iwama, for providing a really new perspective for us to understand more. And I didn't think about it actually before. I don't know that the car model is not limited to one client, but can be a group of people. And you are right. And I will try it in my future clinical practice. And I think it's actually can also facilitate the family conference, and they can it can facilitate how the family can make a decision for the treatment process, and the assessment too is a great way.
I remember a number of years ago, I went to Germany and I met an elderly couple. They had been married for something like 68 years or almost 70 years they were married. And when I uh, asked them if I could do a Kawa model drawing of the, the, the the woman took her hand and grabbed her husband's hand and pulled him to the dining room table. And there they said, "We've been together for so long that our lives are one. We have so many memories that are embedded together." So, Mr. Iwama, you are asking to make a river drawing about my life? No. I will sit down here and draw a river together with my husband. And it was really wonderful because they began to think back and reminisce, remember all of the good times when they were dating and became married, when they had their first children, when one of their children died, when the war came, uh, the hardships and the difficulties. And it was an incredible, incredible river. But I found that the two of them were really, really like one. And it was the first time that I thought, oh, the client doesn't have to just be one person. You can do this collectively. Remember, the river is just a metaphor. It's a tool for you to use. Don't let the tool control you and your ideas. You control the tool, the metaphor, and make it work so that it serves your purpose. If you don't have time to sit down and draw pictures of rivers, many occupational therapists use the Kawa model as just a framework that they keep in their mind. Kind of like a set of lenses. Like, this is the Kawa model, and they put this on and they view the client. And they're able to always think about the environment, the person, and all of these different kinds of elements. They want to keep a holistic view of the person. So some people just use it like that too. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Hello. Thank you, Dr. Yama, to give them so many good feedback and very idea in developing the Kawa model in Hong Kong. We will definitely put it in a new training strategy in my clinical setting. And it is a wonderful session for June and Jason in this beautiful morning with a group of leading professionals, Eddie, Essential, Dr. Benedict, and Ivama. They really learn a lot from all of you. And your encouragement will really push our setting to further and further in application of our model in Hong Kong. I'm already awaiting to see you all very soon in Hong Kong. Thank you so much for your kind coming and present in the sharing session today.
Thank you
Yes,
so much.
thank you very much because we really learn a lot from it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you.
Thank
Cheers.
you. So,
Oh, can I, Armstrong, can I end with just one last
Sure.
comment?
sure.
Sure.
Okay. I spoke a little bit about what happens when the locus of control moves from the individual into more of a harmony with the environment. You'll find that fundamentally, when you move the center of power away from the individual toward the environment, there are many things that are affected. And I want you to think about this in the next few weeks to come. That is, how does our sensation of time change? Okay. June spoke about example of, I believe it was June or Jason spoke about fate. Fate. Okay. Fate in itself is something that moves power from inside of the individual toward the environment. I found that in Japan, in a much more collectivist culture, where there is more of a consciousness of harmony with the environment and nature, is that there is a tendency to be focused on the here and now. What is happening presently? There is not so much thought about the future so much, because it's fate. Fate will happen. So what's important is here and now. But it's interesting that in places like America or Canada, I imagine even in Australia, when we become individual centric, then we have a tendency to be very much future oriented. And the future is connected through our doing. So you know, it's so interesting. It's fundamental to our basic ideas around occupation as we talk about it in occupational therapy. It's a very important concept that I believe will meet many challenges as occupational therapy grows around the world. But it's really, there's a reason why, you know, we are focused in on future goals. We want short-term goals and long-term goals. And we want to then lay out a plan of activities to help us to achieve those goals, as if those things are all in our own control. But in places like Asia, we've learned that when we are in harmony with the universe, when we are inseparably embedded to everything, in order for those things in the future to happen the way that we want them to, there has to be so many different factors that have got to come together precisely in the perfect time and in combination with all kinds of other things. It's like when somebody here in America says, I want to grow up one day and study really hard and I want to become a doctor. Well, there's a belief that if you work hard enough and you make the right decisions along the way and you get some good help, you can become a doctor. That's the American dream. You can be whatever you want to be. You just have to work hard for it. But in Asia, a person will say, yes, I want to become a doctor, I think. But in order for that to happen, I have to have good teachers. I have to have parents who are supportive and have money and resources. I have to make sure that I don't get into a traffic accident or that I don't get sick. And I have to have all kinds of other things that have to happen that are outside of my control. So fate will allow me to become a doctor, perhaps. But I don't know yet. What I do know is what I can do in the here and now. Okay?
Mm.
So this is the beauty of culture and how essential this is to how we construct our reality and the views of the world, as well as the views of ourselves and the environment around us. I think you've got a great future ahead of you. I wish you all the very best. I'm now very interested in your careers and what you do from this point on. So I'm going to follow you and I'm going to encourage you together with everybody else. You are the great future of our profession, especially in your part of the world. So I wish you all the very best. Thank you so much for an outstanding project and presentation. And lastly, I'll just say, this is culture. You called your presentation something about the gray-haired experience or something like that, right? I think probably in Hong Kong, it's not such an unusual thing to hear about elderly people being referred to as being gray-haired. Here in North America, there is a preference for the word silver. So when we talk about silver generation, it's kind of a nice way of saying old people.
Mm.
And you know, my hair is becoming gray, but here I would rather say it's becoming silver. So I think that when people saw the presentation title on Facebook and on the internet, I think they were wondering, what is this presentation about? They're going to talk about gray-haired people? My goodness, you know, I don't want to call my grandmother gray-haired, even though her hair is colored gray. So, you know, that's culture. It's appropriate for Hong Kong, maybe confusing for people that are living in another cultural setting. But all in all, I think it's great. It's a wonderful way to spend my Sunday night. I don't know what time it is down there in Melbourne for
afternoon.
Dr. Benedicto, but however,
It's 11 a.m.
oh, okay. I don't feel so bad then. All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So good to see you all.
And we will left the email for all of you. And if you guys have any further comments, feel free to send us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Maybe I'm promising that we will show a presentation in the Kawa model fan page in the coming of days. This kind don't feel free to leave some message or further comment for improving their works in Hong Kong. Thank you everyone, especially Eddie, Dr. Yama, Dr. Benedict, and so good to see you again, Essential. I want to have more interaction with you when you have time. Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye bye, Michael. Bye bye.